Frankie was running for his life, a horde of impossible monsters hot on his heels. He tried his best to keep a lead, twisting and pivoting through the seemingly endless aisles. The shelves were stocked with everything under the sun, except a way out of this mess. He's already bloodied and bashed from the last near miss. One of his legs twisted into an unpleasant limp. The gash on his forehead throbbed with a low, humming pain. His vision swam in and out. A persistent whining hum that may indicate a concussion was blotting out most of his ability to hear. But in the brief snatches of relief, he could hear the same monotonous droning words coming out of every single one of his pursuers. "The store is now closed. Please exit the building." Oh, how he wished he could. He'd been trapped inside this Walmart for days now. He'd just come in to get more diapers for his 10-month-old, when he'd somehow gotten lost and never been able to find his way out again. Then the lights went off, as they would for 12 hours at a time by the count of his watch. And it was at night that the creatures attacked. They looked human. Well, almost, but not quite. And that was what made them so frightening. They were freakish, faceless, malformed abominations, with limbs either too long or too short, nightmarish proportions. But they were decked out in the familiar blue waistcoats that every Walmart employee is forced to wear while on the store floor. Frankie had barely survived his first run-in with the staff earlier in the night, but he was sure that there'd be no way for him to survive the second, not when he was already injured without a weapon. Soon, they'd catch him, and when they did, they wouldn't just be calmly escorting him towards the door. And sooner than he'd even anticipated, the moment came. He tripped and fell forward, tumbling over his feet and skidding across the well-buffed ground, a tangled and humiliated pile of limbs. All he could do was wince as the monsters closed in on him. Bang, bang, bang. A staccato burst of gunfire cut down the horde of creatures. Rifles and shotguns erupted from the darkness, tearing through the putty-like bodies of the beasts and dropping them where they stood. Frankie could barely believe what he was seeing. Against all odds, his attackers had been destroyed at the last moment. Frankie, still too shocked to stand, watched figures emerge from the aisles all around him. They were alternatively dressed in all black or in dark jungle camo, most wearing balaclavas or face paint. They all wielded rifles or shotguns and had large knives or camping hatchets holstered at their belts. One man led the pack, taller than the others, built broader. He removed his balaclava to reveal a tough old face with close cropped hair, the kind of man who looked like he's carved out of oak. Let's call him the manager, because in this Walmart he and his militia ran the show. Because there are a few big differences between how things would go in an infinite Ikea and an infinite Walmart. First and foremost, unlike a certain purveyor of Scandinavian flat-pack furniture, Walmart sells guns and ammo. And with that, the humans have a clear advantage over the staff. Well, the humans that can get their hands on it, anyway. While the rest of his gun-wielding associates worked to secure the perimeter, the manager knelt next to Frankie, seeming to size him up with a glance. "What's your name?" he asked. After taking a moment to establish all this was real, the injured man replied, "Frankie." Some of the others had started to gather around. One of them told the manager that the situation was under control, and the manager just nodded in agreement. "Thank you," Frankie said, tears of relief welling up in his eyes. "Thank you for saving me." The manager cocked his head to the side at that. "You've got this situation wrong, son," he said. "You ain't saved." Before Frankie could even realize what was going on, the manager and his men drew their knives and hatchets and set upon him. Once they were done and wiping their blades clean, one of the manager's men sighed and said to him, "That poor schmuck was already run down when he got to him. Hunting limpers and staff ain't nearly as fun as newbies." The manager's face betrayed no emotion. "Some new prospects will come around soon enough. They always do, as long as we wait." On the outside of the infinite void that was the Walmart, a family approached. The Lucases. The father, David, the mother, Olivia, and the two sons, Alex and Kevin, aged 17 and 19. The tight-knit clan was on a special mission. In a few months' time, Kevin would be heading off to college in a different state, so they were going on one more big cross-country road trip as a family to commemorate this special occasion. But they were in need of supplies. And where better to get those road trip provisions than Walmart, the retail superstore that seemed to have a whole universe under its roof. It was just that in this case, they would take on a more literal meaning than they had imagined. And would any of them live to see natural light again on the other side? The Lucases parked their family sedan and disembarked into the Walmart, having no idea of the horrors that lurked deep within. Of course, it didn't seem that way at first. They shared a polite moment of banter with the Stepford smiling greeters at the door before grabbing a shopping cart and heading inside. The store was, as always, bustling. Hundreds of people going about their business, being chaperoned around by overworked employees, buying products that serviced them from cradle to the grave. From diapers to cremation urns, you can find it all at Walmart. But what you can find there shouldn't concern you nearly as much as what can find you. Still, the Lucases went about their business staying together. After all, they'd have plenty of time to be apart soon when Kevin left for college, wouldn't they? So now they wanted to savor every minute of togetherness. And then they got lost. They didn't notice it at first, but it soon became apparent that it'd been a while since they'd seen another customer or store employee. They were adrift in a kind of fog of the store's most bizarre and esoteric products. Golden Girls Chia Pets, nail polish for dogs, pickle-flavored ice pops, and other things that likely hadn't been purchased this side of 2013. What section of the store had they even wandered into? The family tried to retrace their steps, but no matter how far they went, they didn't even seem to track back into familiar territory. It was more strange products on endless twisting rows, and what first just seemed like confusion started to turn to fear and panic when they saw the words, "Beware the staff," scrawled onto a nearby wall. David tried to keep his family calm. There must be some way to get out of this. Walmart is a retail giant all over the country. They can't be the first people who've lost their way in the labyrinthian halls. The rest of the family tried to keep brave faces as they stuck together and moved from department to department. When they entered the hardware section, they found profound relief when they encountered a person in an employee uniform wandering down the far end of the aisle. At least, they thought it was a person. Kevin ran forward first, eager to find some kind of solace from their strange situation. He called out, but the figure remained aloof as Kevin got closer. He put a hand on the man's shoulder, and when he turned, Kevin screamed. The figure did not have a face, just a lumpy, misshapen head, and below it, a body that had strangely wrong proportions, like some nightmarish caricature of a Walmart employee drawn by someone both blind and insane. And the family didn't need to see much more of it to know that running for their lives was the correct option here. Though if they'd looked behind themselves, they would have noticed that the monster wasn't following them. In fact, it barely seemed to register any interest in them at all. Such is the way of the staff. During the day, they're largely placid and unresponsive. It's only at night, when the customers aren't supposed to be in the store, that they get aggressive. But this encounter had dangers of its own. As they ran away in blind fear from encountering something that by all rights never should have existed, the Lucas family was separated. The mother, Olivia, ran off to the sporting goods section, a veritable maze in and of itself. The father, David, ran off into a section full of frozen food, suffused with the endless hum of refrigerators. And the two brothers, Kevin and Alex, who managed to stay together, continued off into the seemingly endless hardware section. Because of the ever-expanding maze-like nature of the Infinite Walmart, the chances of them finding each other again were minimal after this. But that would be the least of all their troubles. As if to underscore this point, the lights up above suddenly switched off. The store had entered its night cycle, and now none of them were safe. Olivia found herself wandering around in the dark in the sporting goods aisles. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, turning on the flashlight feature and illuminating the aisle in front of her with a flash of clinical white light. And in the process, she also illuminated the crowd of staff members standing in front of her. "The store is now closed. Please exit the building." And so the chase began. Olivia ran off as a crowd of about 5 staff members gave chase. But unlike poor Frankie all those hours earlier, she wasn't going to go down without a fight. Drawing on all her instincts and feeling a surge of adrenaline through all her vital systems, she turned and grabbed a hockey stick from one of the nearby large plastic buckets. Without a second to waste, She turned and started striking with all her might, cracking heads and breaking limbs. She struck and pounded against the gang of staff members until they were little more than a pile of battered corpses on the floor. She would never let these monsters stop her from seeing her family again. The rifle bullet that hit her in the shoulder was another matter entirely. She felt a sudden, shocking influx of pain that knocked the breath from her lungs. Adrenaline kept her moving, at least. She turned intuitively in the opposite direction of the shot and started running, until another loud, echoing bang blasted through the store. She felt a tremendous pain in her left calf and collapsed to the ground, shrieking. Were these monsters behind this? No. A number of harsh flashlight beams pierced the darkness as the manager's foot soldiers emerged. They'd been here for years, some of them. They were driven to madness by the isolation and by the things they'd seen and done. But madness was an asset in the Infinite Walmart. Having a broken mind helped understand a broken place. It allowed them to navigate the maze together without getting lost, but never let them escape. That was fine, of course. They didn't want to escape. They were so much happier here. Olivia tried to murmur out some pleas for her survival. She had a family. The problem being, her attackers already knew that, and that's what excited them. The attackers drew a wide variety of machetes and swords, because, yes, they do sell those in Walmart, even ones with funky colors, and got to work. All in all, she would be the lucky one. At least she died first. David, having no idea what had already happened, was trapped in his own kind of purgatory in the freezer section. There were no monsters here, just the piercing, oppressive cold and the endless hum of the refrigeration units. The whole area was relatively easy to see in, despite the lights above turning off, because of the soft blue lights emanating out of each of the freezer units. Where was his wife? Where were his sons? He couldn't tell. He just needed to get back to them somehow if he ever wanted to. His thought was interrupted by a crossbow bolt narrowly missing his head and sticking through the glass door of the refrigerator next to him. He turned and looked out at the dark, stunned and confused, when more crossbow bolts started flying in, each one heralded by the quiet twang of the crossbows firing them. Because of course, they also sell a wide range of crossbows at Walmart. He did his best to run, not sure which direction to head in, as more of the bolts rained down. He was struck all over his body, especially in the limbs, but curiously, never anywhere that would be fatal. They didn't want to kill him, just immobilize him, which they did. And when David was on the floor, a human pincushion that wasn't dead, just unable to move, he heard those terrible words. "The store is now closed. Please exit the building." The men who doomed David watched, amused in the dark, as a horde of staff zeroed in on the immobilized screaming man and beat him to death with their malformed fists. Sometimes that was even more fun than killing people who'd wandered into the store yourself. Variety is the spice of death, after all. But none had it worse than the brothers Kevin and Alex. They'd been captured by the manager himself and some of his most aggressive and loyal underlings, and had a proposition for the boys. "I'm not a heartless man," he said. "The weapons here give us an advantage against the staff, but we still need the numbers. We recruit when we see potential, but that potential needs to be proved." The men threw a baseball bat onto the floor between the brothers. They knew what they had to do. Only one of them would be surviving this. "Make it quick," the manager said. "We don't want to attract too much attention, do we?" All in all, it had been a good day of hunting for the manager and his men. Forever willingly trapped in the Infinite Walmart, the store took good care of them, and they couldn't wait for it to deliver them their next prey. Now check out how to actually beat SCP-3008 The Infinite Ikea and surviving inside SCP-3008 The Infinite Ikea for more.